You have some out-of-town investors that are coming in and they're paying those prices, which go against, certainly my training and how you evaluate a deal.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association, providing benefits and services to real estate investors and rental property owners for over 48 years. With your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group.
Hello and welcome to episode 68. My guest today got his start in real estate investing 7 years ago as a flipper and rehabber, and I met him at a real estate investment conference, and I got to know him and was really impressed. And he was there to learn more about multifamily because he wanted to transition from flipping and rehabbing into multifamily. Today, he's doing both. Jordan Anderson is my guest. He is the owner of ASAP Realty Investments out of Philadelphia. And Jordan, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Brian. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so you and I got to know each other probably just a little over 2 years ago or under 2 years ago.
Yep.
Tell our audience where we met and what you were doing there.
Sure. So we met at the Dave Lindell apartment multifamily boot camp. And basically, I was there to learn the ins and outs of multifamily investing. So I had been doing flips, and it's great, as anybody that's been in the business knows. The cash flow from flips, it's not really consistent if you're not consistently doing it. So I was looking for something that was a little bit more consistent. And multifamily investing is something that provides, that consistent residual income month on month and not just chunks here and there. So I was at the conference to learn more about the strategy for buying multifamilies, how to analyze multifamily deals, and then just some of those terminologies and the differences between a regular single family flip versus purchasing multifamily for a long-term investment.
Starting with the flipping, take us back to the beginning. What got you into flipping in the first place?
Sure. So I've always been interested in real estate since as young as I can remember. My grandfather was one of the ones that always preached, the one thing that they don't make any more of is land. So buy land, get into real estate. So growing up, that's something that has kind of been embedded in me. And, as I grow up, look at different structures being built, I thought, hey, that would be pretty cool. So about 7 years ago, I was lucky enough to have one of my good friends that was flipping full-time. So I just kind of got underneath his wing and really took the time to learn the game, studied underneath him. And then from there, so did that for about 3 years. And then from there, ventured out on my own and started doing my own deals.
So you kind of went from knowing almost nothing about real estate investing to being taken under the wing of a mentor who sounds like he was pretty good. What did you learn during that period?
So during that period, just learned the ins and outs of how to go assess a property. Then once, assess the property, being able to put your offer in, negotiating, and then, from there, just really the steps of construction. So my mentor was somebody who owned a construction company as well. So I really got the play-by-play on how to go about doing the construction, which, as a newbie, never having done construction before, that's something that can be very intimidating. So being able to walk through that process from start to finish, that was something that I definitely think was very invaluable, even though, you can hire your general contractor, at least in my mind, being able to be knowledgeable of the process, even though you have somebody else running your jobs, that's definitely something that's invaluable.
Yeah, it seems like you could learn quite a bit through that arrangement. What were you? Did you have a full-time job at the time, or were you getting paid, or were you making money while you were going through this sort of mentorship?
So I had a full-time job at the time, and the only thing I was doing took a couple extra bucks to feel more invested in the deal and would also invest in that deal, that I was going and following on. So that way, I could earn some sort of return. But yeah, still full-time job. My mentor is in Baltimore, is in Philadelphia, so it was traveling down to Baltimore every so often, phone calls, daily, weekly phone calls to really get caught up to speed.
Take us through the first flip you did on your own, where it was just you and your money and your efforts. What was that like?
The first flip, there's nothing like getting hands-on experience the first time when you are the end-all be-all. So that flip was something where, found the property in the area of Philadelphia that I was familiar with, did my numbers, crunched my numbers, felt comfortable making an offer. It was actually, I did it, got it through one of the auction sites. So it was sight unseen as far as the inside of the property. But I had driven by it multiple times, took an assessment of the outside of the building, and felt pretty comfortable being able to purchase it. From there,
what did you pay for it, and what kind of neighborhood was it in?
So it was in a residential neighborhood, a residential that had existing rehabbers in the area that would do flips in the area. So it was a stable neighborhood, and I paid $65,000 for it.
Okay. And where did that money come from? Did you have that saved up, or did you have to borrow it?
So I had a little bit saved, and then I did what a lot of people say don't do, lines of credit.
Okay, from the bank?
Yes.
Okay, so tell us what happened. How did that work out?
So the first thing, being new person in the area, trying to find a contractor, putting together a team, that was something that was challenging. So that to me was the biggest challenge of the deal. Once I was able to find my contractor, just then going and executing the deal went relatively seamless until I started running into issues with the contractor himself, which I ended up having to move on from him. So then from after moving on from that contractor, then going out trying to find another contractor. So I went through a good number of contractors, learned a lot of invaluable experience about what to look for when selecting contractors, and really they're the ones that are your bread and butter. You can have your deal, all your numbers look right, but then after that, your contractor is the one that has to execute. So making sure that you're picking somebody that can execute to bring your vision to fruition, something that's very important. So I think from start to finish, it probably took me about 9 months, I believe. So that was finding different contractors, at a point where the money was low because I gave a lot of it to the previous contractor. So it was really, even though I had a mentor, there were still a lot of mistakes that I made because I went against my mentor's teachings.
Give us an example. How did you go against what your mentor might have advised?
So for instance, mentor advised only give your contractor X amount of money. For this phase of that they're on. Don't worry about they're saying they need money for something else that comes in another phase, or anything that's really outside of the scope. I understood what my mentor was saying in principle, but then once you're actually in the heat of the moment, it's what your contractor is saying. It sounds good. It sounds like they know what they're talking about. It sounds like they're really telling you, unless you do this, your project won't come in on time. So then it's, going against what my mentor said, and then siding with the contractor, which didn't end up very well.
Was this the first contractor that you had to let go?
Yes, this was the first contractor.
So did you lose a little bit of money with him because you might have paid more up front?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. So I lost a little bit of money with him, and then he actually tried to come back and get me to pay even more for him to come and finish the work.
Uh,
Um, yeah. So that I did not do.
so that was an expensive lesson on hiring the right contractor, huh?
Correct.
Yeah. So what you found someone else who came in, finished the job. How did it all turn out in the end?
So at the end, it turned out where I made a little bit of money on the deal. And the biggest things that ate into my profit were the time and the holding costs. So that was good. But I was happy where, it was my first deal. Walked away with a little bit of money and a lot of experience.
Yeah. So, and that was the very beginning. That was 7 years ago?
Well, it was about 4 years ago when I first hopped out on my own.
Okay, so that was 4 years ago. Take us through. What happened next? Did you do more flips for a while? I mean, where are you with your flipping at this point?
Yep. So what happened next? I took time to kind of reflect things that went right, went wrong, and then started looking for my next deal. Did another flip, and then did a few more flips, and then from there started looking at the multifamily for residual income, because during the time where I was flipping, you're noticing that there's a lot of money that's going out. You don't have anything coming in on a monthly basis as far as investments. So it was just really balancing it, or looking at my portfolio or my strategy and saying, in order to be able to cover the cost of flipping, I want to have something coming in month on month outside of what I was making at my job. And then from there, it turned to, okay, well, let's do flips so that I can then finance, my longer term multifamily rentals. So where I'm at now is doing flips to get the capital to then finance my multifamily long-term holds. And from there, just keep on repeating. So I'll buy multifamily property, do a couple flips, buy some more. So that's really where I am right now, where it's just, the cycle of looking for deals to essentially get money to then put into the long-term income producing deals.
Great. So are you doing this full time then?
So I'm not full time just yet. I actually just told one of my buddies that I'll be full time once I buy my first large apartment building. So that's something that I'm actively looking forward to now.
So you're definitely paving the way. It's interesting that you decided you wanted to get into flips, and you found a mentor who showed you how to do it. You took the action to actually do it, and you've been doing it ever since. You then decided, well, you know what? I really need some cash flow to keep me afloat between these flips. Multifamily is the way to go. And that's where you and I met, was at the David Lindahl Apartment Boot Camp.
Yep.
So what did you learn there? We're not shilling for David Lindahl here. I mean, I've talked to Brad Sumrock, and I think there's plenty of good instructors out there who teach these methodologies. But what did you learn at the David Lindahl camp that you took away?
Yep. So I think what I took away from there was just how to value a deal. Commercial or even multifamilies, how you value those deals are different than how you value your, regular fix and flip properties. So that was the biggest thing that I went to there looking to learn, was how to value those deals. And then also what I went looking for was just to connect with other people that were already in the industry of multifamilies, to be able to form some sort of friendship, mentorship with somebody. And luckily, I found you, and I've been able to bounce different questions off of you periodically. So that's essentially the reason why I went to that boot camp.
Good. So I think the important takeaway here is that you invested in furthering your education.
Correct.
And you got information and learned things, and then met people that were able to help propel you into multifamily. Although when we met, you already had 2 4-units, didn't you?
Correct. I think so the way that it went, I had went to, I believe it was a free weekend seminar in March, and then signed up for the boot camp, which was going to be held in April. And between the time of March and April, after I went to the original 2-day free seminar, I really hit the ground looking for apartment buildings. And I was able to come across those 2, which I had actually put under contract and purchased before the actual boot camp. So at the boot camp, I was a newly multifamily building owner.
So and I remember that, and we had an interesting conversation because you had an interesting opportunity with those. But let's talk about those 2 4-units. How did you acquire them, and what mindset shift did you have to go through to go from flipping to actually owning 2 4-units?
Yep. I actually found the deals on the MLS. And luckily enough for me, they were actually right next to each other. 2 different owners, I guess, decided to put them up at the same time. So the mindset shift that I had to go through was, instead of looking at it from the short term, how can I get in and out of the property, but more so of a long term, what do I need to do to this property to make sure that it's going to be sustainable in the long term, so that I'm not going to have to keep putting in money year after year for things that I could have put the money into upfront to then make the ownership of the building a lot easier. So it's taking that into account to then be able to structure your offer in such a way where you're essentially building or discounting the price of the purchase because of those things, that deferred maintenance that the previous owners may have left, that that you're going to have to take care of at some point. So I think it's really being able to look at it from that point of view. And then the other thing was that these buildings, they had some deferred maintenance, but they were also fully occupied. So then being able to develop a strategy on how you would go about making those improvements while you still have a building that's occupied.
So you were able to take a long-term view of the investment rather than saying, okay, I'm going to have to spend $40,000 up front to get it where I want it to be. I can spend that over a period of 3 years, for example.
Yep. Correct.
Yeah, and I'd imagine with your rehabbing and construction experience, you kind of had a good sense of what kind of money you would have to put into it.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. Now, there was another, I seem to remember there was another 4-unit right next door that you were looking at. Is that the case?
Correct. So there were the 2 4 units that were next to each other. So I was able to acquire both of those. And then there was another 4-unit that was next to that one, which the owner didn't have on the market. Just through friendly conversations with the owner over time, as I was there overseeing the work that was being done, checking in on the progress, just talk to them to see what their mindset was if they were looking to sell. Unfortunately, they weren't looking to sell at the time, but I didn't come on too aggressive, too strong to turn them off, but just letting them know, well, I am an investor in the area. If there ever comes a point in which you're willing to sell, definitely give me a phone call.
Has that happened yet?
It has not happened yet.
But you're nurturing that relationship so that when they do
Correct.
decide to sell, they will hopefully come to you.
Correct.
And I remember getting excited about the fact that you had 2 4-units next door to each other, because you could, if you have 1 4-unit, you basically have a residential property.
Yep.
And it's valued based on the comparables in the neighborhood. But if you have 2 4-units and you can get the bank to look at them as an 8-unit, now you have a commercial property.
Yep.
which means you can increase your NOI to force appreciation on the property.
Correct.
So how did that work out for you? Do you see these as two separate 4 units, and are you treating them as such with your financing, or were you able to get the bank to look at them as a commercial property?
So right now I'm treating them as 2 separate 4 units. In order for the bank to look at them as the one commercial unit, I'd have to go down with the city and petition them to combine the addresses so that on the deed it shows as being one address, which I haven't looked into just yet.
Okay, so the bank sees that there's 2 separate parcels, so they're going to treat them as 2
Correct.
separate properties.
Correct.
Okay. Interesting. So you had those when we met. Where did you go from there? What was your next step in acquiring multifamily?
Yep. So then from there, I was able to have the opportunity to purchase a triplex, which the triplex was completely empty, had been on the market for a while. It was bank owned. So it probably took me a good 3 months of negotiating with the bank for them to finally, or for us to finally agree on a price that was that both parties could agree to.
How did that work out negotiating directly with the bank? I mean, how did you even get to be able to talk to someone at the bank to negotiate?
Yep. So this was an MLS deal. I used same realtor. He's pretty knowledgeable of, what I want to pay, what my negotiation strategies are. Pretty much we started out, with our number, which was pretty far off from what they were asking. But the longer it sat on the market, it played to our favor, where we're able to, do different things, or pretty much point out to the bank that they were losing money month over month by just having it sit there instead of essentially selling it to somebody that's a known performer that would close the deal, and they wouldn't have to think about it afterwards.
Yeah, because by this point you had built up a track record for yourself.
Correct.
Yeah. What did the bank want for it, and how much did you end up paying?
I believe the bank wanted $125 for it, and I ended up closing on it for $75.
Nice.
And yep. And it was, like I said, it was empty. It wasn't in that bad a shape. So I ended up putting in probably close to another 40 or 50,000 into the building to, really renovate it and, just make it look nice.
So eventually you had 125 into it, but that included the rehab as well.
Correct.
And what kind of, did the bank provide financing for you, or did you have to get money elsewhere?
So I had to get my own financing for the deal.
And did you go to another bank, or did you have to use private money?
For this one, I went to another bank. So it's just in learning in the natural progression, I'll say. Now I'm starting to do deals with private money, but for this deal, I use the bank. What
kind of rent income do you get from the 3 units?
So this one is 3 2-bedroom, 1-bath units, and the monthly rent gross is close to $3,000.
Okay, that's pretty good. Are utilities split?
Yes, utilities are split.
Good. So are you just paying water?
Yes.
And sewer? So that's nice. That's must give you a pretty decent cash flow at the end of the month.
Oh yeah, definitely.
You have these 2 4 units, and I know you've acquired some since then, but you have the 2 4 units, you have the 3 units. If you look at your cash flow that you're getting from these units, how close are you to being able to kind of say, you know what, I'm going to go real estate full time?
I'm close. I think one of the things that will help me now, especially so before, it's being concerned about having the cash flow to not only pay my bills once I leave my full-time job, but then also have the cash flow to still continue investing in properties. So I think to me that was one of the biggest things I wanted to make sure that I still had. And with that, as you start to build up, your portfolio, as you start to build up your reputation, you naturally attract people that are interested in investing in real estate, but may not necessarily have the time, the experience, the know-how, or even the desire to be that front person. So that's where the private money comes in, which I'm really starting to use private money for deals now. So that's something where now that that's in place, I'll say that with the cash flow of my properties, I'm closer to walking away from my full-time than I previously would have thought.
Yeah, so that's an important thing, because when I first got into real estate, I'll tell you a quick little story. When I first got into real estate, and this was back in 2001, I went to a Robert Allen seminar, and I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna start buying single family houses. I'm gonna become a real estate investor. And shortly thereafter, I quit my job to focus on that. But I quickly realized, well, without a job, I can't get a loan.
Yep.
And then I realized, well, okay, maybe I should go back to work. So luckily I had a forgiving boss, and I was able to get back to work and, acquire some financing. But yeah, that's an important consideration, that when you weigh whether or not you should stay at your job or focus on real estate full time, because that can impact your availability of funds.
Absolutely.
Now, but you've made a mind shift to using private money. Tell me how you've been able to cultivate some of your private money contacts.
A lot of my private money contacts, they're actually people that are already within my network. And a lot of it is not necessarily really, or I guess it's advertising what it is that you do. So a lot of people, they know me. Some people may not necessarily know everything that I was into, just because I didn't really walk around saying, I'm a real estate developer, I'm a real estate investor. But now, that's something that I'm more comfortable leading off with, because I have, the successful track record to show it. And, it always starts of, I'm interested, let's meet to, so I can hear a little more about it. And then from there, it's just really being able to sit down, talk through my investment strategies, and then also walking them through some of the projects if they want to see them. And then from there, if they're interested and want to move forward, I've just added somebody else that's another potential private money contact that I can call when I have a deal that's available, to see if they're interested in getting in on the deal.
Now, are these debt investors or equity partners?
So depending on the deal, I'll do either debt or equity. I have some people who prefer just to be debt, some that like the equity portion. So depending on the deal, I'll tailor it to that person's preference, as long as it still makes sense for me.
Yeah, and are they primarily investing in your flips? Because I know you're still flipping quite a bit. Are they investing in those, or are they investing in your multifamily as well?
So right now they're primarily investing in the flips. And then from there, like I said, I'm starting to look at those larger buildings, which then I'll also have people I have had people telling me, listen, this is what I want to invest in. I want to invest in a larger multifamily building. And naturally that's where I'm going as well. So I'll have those people that want to invest there. Not everybody's investment strategy is different. And once I get to the point where I'm doing the larger stuff, I'll have to make the decision either to talk to them to see if those that are just primarily interested in the flips, that short turnaround, want to move into the larger stuff, or potentially pass them off to other people I know within the industry, so that they can continue just focusing on the flips.
Yeah. So what is the Philadelphia market like right now? I mean, where are you able to find the types of flips and multifamily deals that make sense for an investor?
I'll say, to me, the Philadelphia market is wide open. I think, or the way that I've always described it, is it's a little big city that kind of gets lost in the shadows, it being between New York and DC. But they're still very affordable prices. The growth of the city is something that's there, and then also the future growth with the advancement in the transportation industry. Particularly talking about building a high-speed rail line or continuing to work along that, which would then reduce the time to get either to DC or New York. So I think that there's a lot of things that are in the mix that gives Philly a bright future. As far as the rehabs, there are certain sections of the city that have just gone on a tear, and they started, and they've changed completely. And people that have been rehabbing in those areas have made a lot of money. There's other sections of the city that have been historically, residential, solid working class neighborhoods where you can flip in consistently and still get returns. So there's a lot of money to be made. And then on the multifamily side, from what I see right now, I'll speak specifically for the smaller units because that's primarily what I deal in right now. With the smaller units, there's a lot of opportunity. The inventory may not necessarily always be there, but it's just being able to act quickly when that inventory does present itself. For the larger deals that I've that I've analyzed, the problem I come up with in doing or in analyzing some of those deals, the problems I see, a lot of people, they're trying to factor in the growth factor of Philly in their prices. And depending on the size of the building, you have some out of town investors that are coming in and they're paying those prices, which go against, certainly my training and how you go and evaluate a deal. So I think, so to me, that's been one of my limiting factors in not being able to go bigger, faster, was just the deals not necessarily matching up with my investment criteria.
Yeah, that's an excellent point because I see that here in Grand Rapids as well. You and I, we did the David Lindahl training, and I'm sure any other training out there will teach you this, that you want to pay based on the value of where it is today. If you're buying a multifamily or apartment complex, you basically take the historical NOI up, the trailing 12 numbers, and you base your offer and your value on the historical numbers.
Yep.
But now, because the market is so hot and you have a lot of investors from out of state who are, to them, property in Philadelphia or Grand Rapids seems extremely inexpensive, they're willing to pay based on future value.
Yep.
Well, the rents are 15% below market, so you're going to get them up to here, you're going to improve the occupancy, and let's pay based on what it's going to be worth after we do all the heavy lifting to get it to that point. But that's just not the way that you and I were trained to look at property.
Correct.
Yeah. So I have that same frustration. So you're looking at larger apartment communities, but you're not finding ones that make sense based on the value that the seller is asking. Correct.
And it's just. I'm still cultivating my relationships within the industry, still out meeting people so that, once those deals start to become available, I'll be somebody that, I'll be the first call for somebody that has a deal that meet my criteria. I was at a real estate event and I was talking to a gentleman. And his advice, because I was telling him how I was looking to go bigger, faster, his advice was actually, don't necessarily be in a rush to go bigger, faster, just to say that you're bigger. Definitely look at the longer picture to see how your cash flow is in comparison to, if you were to buy something that's bigger, but may not necessarily cash flow as well as what you have currently. So I think that was definitely something, one of those nuggets of knowledge that I took. And I'm not necessarily in a rush to jump on something that's bigger just to say, I have something that's 100 plus units, where the return on that may not necessarily be anywhere nearly as good as some of my smaller investments.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely. I mean, if you're doing well with your smaller multifamily, your 4-unit, your triplex, and you're seeing higher yields on your investment money, and you're seeing supply that you can still pick these up. And by the way, I know you're about to close on one shortly here.
Yep.
Then stay in that lane. Everything is cyclical. What the values people are paying for apartments right now. The question I have in my mind is, is that sustainable? Or are we going to see that cycle come back down? And I think, you and I both understand the cycle of real estate, that yes, eventually it will come back down.
Yep.
It's just how long will that take? And will money be available at that point to buy in at the bottom? Like a lot of people certainly did in 2008, 2009, 2010.
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about the areas you're investing in. I know you bought in residential areas, but how would you classify these areas? Are they downtown? Are they A, B, C type neighborhoods? How would you describe them?
So where I flip, I'd say they're probably they're not downtown. They're still within the city limits, but they're in more of the residential districts. Probably say it's a B minus area.
And then for those familiar with Philadelphia, give us a sense of neighborhoods or streets.
Yep. West Oak Lane, Mount Airy, essentially the northwest section of Philadelphia is where I focus on flipping.
Getting back to the multifamily investments, I know you're about to close on one next week. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. So it's a triplex, 3 one-bedroom units that has commercial space on the first floor.
Now that's an interesting combination. Is this is this considered a residential property or a commercial property?
I believe technically it's considered a residential property.
What kind of business would go on the first floor?
So currently it's set up as a bar on the first floor. So what I've been, or what I had my property manager do was just research the viability of a bar going back there, or what other type of business would they target if I were to return the first floor to a warm box.
I mean, putting a bar in, even though you historically had one there, could upset the neighbors. So do you see this as a location where you might be able to get a bar back in there without having too much trouble in the neighborhood?
I think so. From knowing the area, I'll mention that it's actually 1 block away from my 2 4 units that I have. So you have some property. Well, you have one property that's zoned for industrial. Then you have another property that's zoned commercial that's right next door. It's kind of on the edge of a residential neighborhood. So I don't necessarily think that there would be too much opposition to it, just because it's the makeup of the neighborhood is less residential where the bar would be.
So that's interesting. Would you consider starting a new bar business, like put your own bar in there? Or are you looking for a tenant?
I'm looking for a tenant. I think right now, although that's probably what a lot of people dream of, especially younger people running their own bar. I think that would take my energy away from what I'm really trying to build in real estate. So I would definitely want to put a tenant in, and just treat them as any other, or treat that as any other income producing property, as opposed to having to worry about the stock levels and making sure the bar is stocked and running right, and all the overhead that comes with the bar business that I just haven't taken the time out to learn.
What do you think the highest and best use would be for that space?
I think a bar probably is the highest and best use. That also comes potentially with some other stipulations where potentially you may not be able to get as much for your rent up on the building, because people may be opposed to living above a bar. So I think
some people may love it.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, so I've definitely had my property manager looking through that for me, to look at the building as a whole and how we can make sure that we can maximize the cash flow of the building.
I mean, could you turn it into a residential?
Yeah, I definitely could turn it into a residential space. I think from the setup, I may be able to put maybe 2 additional units down there.
If you got the city to approve it, you could go from a triplex to a 5-unit.
Correct.
What are you have this under contract for?
I have it under contract for 125.
And what kind of rents do you think you can get from the 1-bedrooms?
So the 1-bedrooms, I'll probably be able to get anywhere between $650 to $700 a month. And then the commercial space, if it were to be a bar, it's about 1,800 square feet, which we could probably rent it for $22 a square foot.
You're really cranking it out with the smaller multifamilies, and I think that's great. And I'm really excited about this 3-unit with the commercial space. Are you still flipping?
Yeah, so I'm currently still flipping, getting that capital, and then investing it into multifamilies. Actually reaching a point now where I really have little to none of my money in the flips that I'm doing. But being able to structure it in a way where I'm still able to make a decent profit on each deal, to then be able to put that aside to be able to invest in these multifamilies when they become available.
What's ballpark profit you look for in each flip?
Gross profit is generally somewhere in the 40, the 50,000 range. I use the formula that a lot of people probably have heard of or use. When they're going into a flip, looking for 65% of the acquisition, or looking to be no more than 65% of the ARV on the acquisition and rehab.
I mean, all in. So between
Correct.
what you pay and what you put into fixing it up, you want to be 65% in for the after repair value.
Correct.
So have you been pretty consistent in staying at that level?
Yep, I've been pretty consistent, and actually the area where I flip in, it's starting to appreciate. So I still have a couple more properties that are going to be hitting the market within the next month, where I was able to buy it at the price, or able to buy it and rehab it for the old 65% of the repair value, after repair value, and then now, since it's appreciated, since I've had those, I'll actually make a little bit more money on those deals. So that's pretty exciting.
Great, good for you. You've obviously been very deliberate about taking the next step and figuring out what you need to do next. But a lot of listeners, they may still be struggling with taking action, or even how to find a mentor or find the right training to do what you're doing. What advice do you have for them?
Yep. So I think the first thing, which is the most important, is really defining your area of competence. So there's money to be made in real estate everywhere. And if you try to track down all the multiple routes and try to go down all the multiple routes to making the money, you'll end up having that analysis paralysis, where so many different options, you don't know which one to choose, so you don't do anything. So I think the most important thing to do is really define your area of competence, define at least where you want to be in to start off. Doesn't necessarily have to be where you're going to stay for your entire real estate investing career, but at least to start off with determining what lane you want to be in, so that you can then pick that lane and then start to learn everything there is to about that lane, so that you then limit your chances or limit your downside while improving your upside of being able to do a successful deal as your first deal, because you've had a laser narrow focus on getting started, and you know exactly what your numbers are, how long it'll take to do one specific thing. So once you really find that one thing that you're focused on, focus on it and learn everything there is to then be able to take that step to jump into it.
And Jordan, if someone wanted to get a hold of you, what's the best way to do that?
Sure. I can be contacted by email. That's probably the best way to get a hold of me right now. My email is asap215@gmail.com. So that's ASAP ASAP, as soon as possible, 215 @gmail.com.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Jordan, for taking the time to talk to us, and it's been a pleasure learning about your flipping and your multifamily. And I wish you good luck with your new 3-unit. I can't wait to hear how that turns out.
Thanks a lot, Brian, and thanks for inviting me on your show.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.